Welcome to our Wednesday night class for this week. Jim Morgan and Aaron Tremblay here with the Smyrna Church of Christ, continuing our study on the life of Joseph. We finished up chapter 42 last week, and this week we'll be beginning in chapter 43. Just remember that Joseph has sent his brothers home. They've detailed the story to Dad and said, "Hey, Dad, here's what happened."
Well, they sort of detailed the story.
They gave the fluffy version to try and convince him to let them take his new favorite son with them. And so as we're going into 43, now we're looking at them making their return to Joseph. And we get to see their second interaction with
And
Joseph.
remember, the first time there gave them nightmares for a long time because they tell their daddy, it doesn't matter how hungry we get, we're not going back and facing this guy unless we fulfill everything he told us. And that was what Joseph wanted to do. He wanted to put the fear of Joseph in him.
And he did.
And all of a sudden, Benjamin comes along and it's all rainbows and roses.
That's right.
The kids at home, he's the favorite. Here, he's the favorite.
The world revolves around him. So that's kind of where we're at in 43. There's some contention between Jacob and his sons, and they're going to finally make this key decision. Remember also, because this is important in 43, that money was found in the sacks on the way back, and then ultimately, after they talk to their dad, they find out that the money's in all of the sacks, not just one of the sacks. So that's going to become pivotal in the decisions they make in 43 as well. So as we pick up in Genesis 43
And
this
remember,
week,
I'm sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
Remember also that Joseph knows they have to come back because later in the story, when Joseph reveals himself, he says it's only been 2 years of famine. There's 5 years to go. There's no way they're going to not.
He could
there's
outweigh
no way
them.
he could outweigh them a long time.
That's right.
So also one thing, because I'll forget this at the end, or
Yeah.
you will, one or the other. We are beginning our live worship services, or we're going back to meeting together on Sunday. This class will continue just the way it is now, so continue to join us until such time as we get back to where we're meeting on Wednesday nights. We will be continuing this study. We appreciate your support and encouragement. If you got any questions, please, we've got plenty of time. We can deal with your questions without slighting Joseph. Please send us any questions at the church website. Give the church office a call. But let us know what y'all want to talk about, because that's what we're here for. But we will be continuing this because we still can't go back to Wednesday night classes, but we can sure do this.
That's right.
Thank you.
So let's jump on in. Chapter 43 of Genesis, beginning in verse 1, it says, "Now the famine was severe in the land." Make sure it repeats that, because this is not an easy time. The demand for food is still there. "And when they had eaten the grain that they had brought from Egypt." Okay, so Dad doesn't right away get on board and say, "Oh, take Benjamin and go back." And even after a couple days, he doesn't say, "Okay, let's get on board." What's really interesting to me, in the fact that they wait this long, is there's one person who's probably really upset that they wait till all the grain has been exhausted and then go back. And that's the guy who's a guest at Joseph's.
Yeah, Simeon. Simeon is the same as Joseph during those 2 years. Every time the door opens, he looks to see if somebody's coming to get him. Simeon's now finding out what that's like.
And he has no idea what's going on.
No.
So it is important. It doesn't get real specific, but when they had eaten all the grain. So, and you keep bringing this up with Jacob. When it's in Jacob's interest, then he's kind of willing to move or become deliberate in what he's doing. And so now Jacob's going to get hungry again. And that's when things changed last time, right? So they ate all the grain they had brought from Egypt. Their father said to them, "Go again and buy us a little food." A little food. But Judah said to him, "The man solemnly warned us, saying, 'You shall not see my face unless your brother is with you. If you will send our brother with us, we will go down and buy you food. But if you will not send him, we will not go down. For the man said to us, 'You shall not see my face unless your brother is with you.'"
I think it's interesting. Judah knows exactly what his daddy is all about, because right there in the middle of that, "And we'll buy food for you."
We'll take care of that while we're gone.
Yeah, but it's for you.
Right.
He knows where daddy's weak spot is. It's the same place it's always been. It's Jacob. And it's always about Jacob.
Remember, going back to the previous chapter in 42, Reuben's already made a really big gesture to his dad before they ran out of grain, that he could kill his two sons you know, if they would just let Benjamin go with them. But Jacob, even with that offer, doesn't immediately jump on that, which, as you said, is
As a
as a
matter of fact, he
grandfather,
just-
is
he
kind of
just-
understandable.
Yeah, we had our 2 grandkids this past weekend, and I'm not making that offer to
That didn't sweet
anybody.
the pie, huh?
Yeah.
But
But
absolutely.
back in verse 38, like you were talking about, my son will not go down there with you.
Mhm.
Boy, he is sure when all that grain is sitting there.
Yeah, when his belly starts grumbling, he gets
Benjamin
a little
becomes a
more
lot less
flexible.
important.
Yes. So they say they won't go down, and again, interesting in these first 5 verses as they're talking to their dad. Remember, they softened up what Joseph had said. They took away that "I'll kill you," and they replaced it with "You can be free to trade in the land if you bring your brother back." And they failed to mention here again that he said, "I will kill you if you
Yeah.
come back." They say, "Well, he just said he doesn't want to see us, you know, more or less. If we don't bring him, you won't see my face unless you bring him." So, still leaving that critical piece of what Joseph actually said out. So here's what Israel said in verse 6. "Why did you treat me so badly as to tell the man that you had another brother?"
And if there's one passage that sums up Jacob, or one phrase, why did you bring this on me?
Mhm.
Because if you go back and look at the life of Jacob, it's amazing how many times you'll find that phrase. This is all about me. Why did you do this to me? How could you do this to a sweet guy like me?
Yes.
Back in chapter 35, I was looking at it
Yep.
before we went on the air. Back in 35, the story of Dinah.
Mm-hmm.
Remember that while the sons are out killing the people in the village for what they did to their sister, he and the guy's father are negotiating the marriage of these 2 crazy kids. You know,
Yeah.
every girl's big dream is to marry her rapist. I mean, you know,
Mhm.
that's. But if you look down after they do what they did, and there's no way to justify what they did,
Right,
it's evil.
correct.
But it's interesting to see Jacob's perspective on it. Back in 34:30, then Jacob said to Simeon and Levi, "You have brought trouble on me by
Mhm.
making me a stench to the Canaanites and Perizzites, the people living in this land. We are few in number, and if they join forces against me and attack me, I and my household will be destroyed." So he's really fond of pronouns that refer to him.
Yeah, how everything impacts him. And again,
Mhm.
remember, as much as Jacob sees this affecting him, Benjamin's the one that actually has to go.
Yeah.
I mean, Jacob gets to stay home. So
Why is he so anxious that I go down there?
Yeah, exactly. So I mean, you're right. I mean, there's certainly a self-absorbed aspect to Jacob that's worth noting here in his comment that he makes specifically in 6. Why did you treat me so badly as to tell me on another brother? So here's their response. The man questioned
I love
us
this.
carefully about ourselves and our kindred, saying, "Is your father still alive? Do you have another brother?" And what we told him was an answer to those questions. Could we in any way know that he would say, "Bring your brother down"? So, kind of interesting their response here to
Yeah.
Jacob. This careful questioning that Joseph did.
Yeah, which, if you go back and look, they were babbling.
Yeah.
Hey, we going to go. We went one day.
All Joseph said was, "Your spies."
Yeah.
And then they just started pouring
They started
out,
pouring everything out.
gave him all the information. But according to them, Joseph acted like a well-versed interrogator.
Yeah.
But they seem
Good
to
ruler,
offer-
bad ruler.
Yeah, exactly. He was playing both parts. And Judah said to Israel's father, "Send the boy with me, and we will arise and go, that we may live and not die, both we and you, and also our little ones. I will pledge of his safety. From my hand you shall require him. If I do not bring him back to you and set him before you, then let me bear the blame forever. If we had not delayed, we would have returned twice." So several things I think really jump out to me when Judah jumps in here. First of all, now we have again a commitment being made. Reuben
Mhm.
makes a commitment. Now Judah's making a commitment, and going back to what we spent a decent amount of time talking about last week, the repentance, the changing
Yeah.
we're seeing. I mean, now Reuben's willing to put up his kids as collateral. Judah's willing to put up himself as collateral for what? For their brother. And clearly they were not that kind of guys
Yeah.
before.
The favored brother.
Mm-hmm.
The one that everybody knows is daddy's favorite. He doesn't care anything about the rest of us.
That's right.
He'll send us back to Egypt in a heartbeat, but he's not sending Benjamin.
The one according to Jacob, at the end of the last chapter, his only son,
Yeah.
right? My son and his brother, he's the only one left, is what he said of Benjamin. So absolutely,
Yeah.
the favoritism seems to have been passed along went right from Joseph to Benjamin. So Judah's offering his life in place of his brother. If I don't bring him back, then may the blood basically be on my hands forever. And then I think it's really interesting because Judah's kind of had somewhat of he's had an interesting role over the last several chapters anyway. But when you look at
And he
this,
will continue to do so.
he says if we hadn't delayed, then we could have come back. We could have done this trip twice already.
Yeah.
So Judah was eager to go, but something was stopping Judah from going. And I think, to your point of Jacob, nobody's going anywhere until Jacob's on board.
Yeah.
So Judah's like, man, we got to get back there, but Dad won't let us have Benjamin, so we just got to sit here and wait. And poor Simeon's
Still sitting down there.
They
But, you know, and the other thing is, you look at it, they must have been on pretty strict rationing.
Mhm.
Trying to make that food stretch out, hoping that, the famine's going to end, and the famine just keeps stretching out.
Mhm.
And we could have come and gone twice. Well, to do what? To get food.
Mhm.
So they're on pretty strict rationing, apparently. They made this food stretch out a lot longer.
Yeah.
Judah, says, we should have gone, 2 times ago.
Mhm.
But no, you won't send Benjamin.
And Joseph, if Joseph has learned anything that we've studied about him so far to this point, Joseph is a man of patience.
Oh yeah.
So while they're sensing the urgency of getting back there for Simeon's sake, Joseph, I'm sure, he's willing to be patient. He knows what it is to just let time do what it does.
Yeah. And he knows there's still 5 years left.
Right, exactly. So he can kind of play the waiting game a little bit. So I just trying to look at this
Let
from.
me
Go ahead.
ask you a question, because I think I remember. How many people were in Jacob's household at this point? How many
70.
went down into Egypt? Yeah, 70 people.
Mhm.
How many donkeys of grain would it take to have fed 70 people for 7 years? Joseph's going to make sure they're not getting that much.
Yeah, no.
But there's a lot of people here that are getting very hungry,
Mm-hmm.
and Jacob doesn't care until he gets hungry.
Well, and that's where I see kind of so as we're looking at all the different parts of this story and what happens between Joseph and his brothers and his father, all along, at least as I read it, I'm trying to keep in mind, okay, what's God doing in all this? And what I see God doing is working on the hearts of the brothers,
Mm-hmm.
right? But again, what we see happening is selfishness driving suffering for people.
Mm-hmm.
That's what causes this whole story to start with Joseph to begin with. The selfishness of his brothers leads to him being sent off into slavery, right?
Mm-hmm.
And now his brothers have changed their heart. I mean, in a dress, they've gone from, I'll sell my brother for $30 to, I'll give my life for my brother.
Mm-hmm.
That's a big jump. No greater love has any man than this, than to lay down
Yeah.
his life for a friend, right? But Jacob's still driving the selfish wagon.
Yeah.
And when somebody is holding the cards and they're going to be selfish, that is going to affect not only them, but it affects the 70 people in his household, minus the one
Yeah.
that's stuck.
And if you look at it, he's never really going to get past the selfish thing.
Right.
It's
So-
just that's who he is, and that's who he's always going to be, and he's not interested in changing. If you go ahead in the story, when they finally get down there and he's introduced to the Pharaoh, the most powerful man in the world, his son's boss, and the Pharaoh looks at him and says, "How old are you?" And Jacob says, I'm this old, and I'm not as old as my fathers have been, and I've got, misery has been my life. Who did all that to him?
Mm.
But he never does get past the whiny
Yeah.
thing.
And we could dig into Jacob's past by going back in Genesis
Mm-hmm.
and just kind of see, Jacob sees all this as injustice, that he's had to
Yeah.
suffer misery in his life, but he's earned some of this.
Yeah, well, he tries to cheat his brother, but then when his father-in-law tries to cheat him, he says, how could you do that to a sweet guy like me?
That's right. We're a family. You can't do that to family.
What's this?
So again, as we
Then he
look at
steals
this,
the idols.
That's right. Takes the idols. What I see in this is God's working on the hearts of the brothers, but even in the midst of that, Jacob still has selfishness, and his selfishness is causing Simeon to suffer, it's causing all his sons to suffer, and now there's no food. And since they wait for the grain to be exhausted, what what are the guys going to eat while these brothers are traveling back? What if they get tied up again for at least an extra 3 days like last time? All those factors involved. So when we look at the story at this particular junction, I think it's important that we ask ourselves, when we look at what God's doing, we say, well, you kind of have a choice. You can allow the things that happen in your life to change you and change your heart to help you grow into the person God wants you to be, like the brothers. Or no matter what happens, even when you've lost one son, you may be losing another. Okay, he's lost 2 sons. He lost Simeon too, according to him, right? Now you're going to lose Benjamin. All these things have happened, and still what you care about is yourself.
Yeah. So, passage in, see the 1st or 2nd Peter, we're talking about the long suffering of God. How can God be so patient? Well, sometimes he doesn't have any choice.
Good point. So I see all that working here in the text. Let's jump into 11. You want to pick up at 11?
Okay. Then their father Israel, there's an interesting point. Their father Israel, the covenant name. Then their father Israel said to them, if it must be, then do this. Put some of the best products of the land in your bags and take them down to the man as a gift. A little balm and a little honey, some spices and myrrh, some pistachio nuts and almonds. Take double the amount of silver with you, for you must return the silver that was put back into the mouths of your sacks. Perhaps it was a mistake. Take your brother also, go back to the man at once, and may God Almighty grant you mercy before the man, so that he will let your other brother and Benjamin come back with you. And I think this next sentence is the most cold-blooded thing I've heard in the Bible. As for me, if I'm bereaved, I'm bereaved. If y'all get killed, I'll live with it.
Well, basically, if Benjamin's not coming back, you might as well none of you come back.
Yeah.
Seems to
if
be
I'm
nice.
bereaved, okay, then I'm bereaved. If you die, you die.
Yeah.
That's just cold blood. And now we're including Benjamin in it.
Correct, because he's being sent along, and I think it's interesting. Jacob's approach to this is kind of an attempt to some degree to buy favor. Right?
Yeah.
Not only do you take back the silver that somehow got in the bags.
Yeah. Maybe it was a mistake.
Right, now it's a mistake. Before he was convinced you did this to his sons, right? But, and he's sending back all these extra gifts and things. So he's trying to win the favor of the man, obviously. But God finally gets brought in again, which is interesting where God enters the story with Joseph. With Joseph, God's mentioned every other line as you're going through all this stuff happening to him. But when his brothers go there, Joseph's the one that brings God up. And they don't bring God up until they find the money in the sack. And now they say, okay, the fear of God is in this. I mean,
and I think, again, Jacob, and for those of you who have been with me in classes before, you know that Jacob, next to Satan, this is my least favorite character. Okay, but he's trying to do it. He's trying to give him a bribe on the cheap.
Yeah.
A little balm, a little honey, some spices and myrrh, some pistachio nuts and almonds, and then double the amount of silver. But it's a little. You'd think he'd want to be sending tons
as much
down
as he
there.
could. Yeah, absolutely. So,
But that's Jacob.
like you said, if I'm bereaved, I'm bereaved. So Jacob's already preparing himself for the worst. I mean, he's
what does
assuming
the
this-
ESV have on that?
That's exactly what it
Does
says.
it? Okay.
It says, and as for me, if I'm bereaved of my children, I'm bereaved.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean,
Que sera, sera.
yeah, whatever will be, will be. You want to keep going?
Yeah. So the men took the gifts and doubled the amount of silver, and Benjamin also. They hurried down to Egypt and presented themselves to Joseph. And when Joseph saw Benjamin with them, he said to the steward of his house, "Take these men to my house, slaughter an animal, and prepare dinner. They are to eat with me at noon." So now Joseph's getting ready to spring the other part of the trap.
Mm-hmm.
Because it all depends on them being reminded constantly, Benjamin's the favorite, Benjamin's the favorite, Benjamin's the favorite.
And a little different reception, though, too, than they
Oh,
got last
yeah.
time. Spies is what they got last time. This time, hey, come to my house. Let's have a
Yeah, well,
festival.
this was Southern. Y'all come on down to the house for
we'll
supper.
Get out the sweet tea and the cornbread.
There you go. And the man did as Joseph told him and took the men to Joseph's house. Now the men were frightened when they were taken to his house. They thought, we were brought here because of the silver that was put back into our sacks the first time. He wants to attack us and overpower us and seize us as slaves and take our donkeys.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I mean, to me, they had a reason to be scared before when he pointed. Joseph's obviously not a man who minces words.
No.
If he wants to call you a spy, you're a spy.
You're a
He's
spy.
going to call you out on it. I mean, and they're like, this has got to be some kind of trap.
Yeah.
He's inviting us for dinner. I mean, what are we getting into here? You know.
Well, and guilt.
Mm-hmm.
It's what we spent this time talking about. They're feeling guilty.
Oh man, it's eating them alive.
It's eating them alive because they hadn't seen Simeon yet. Wonder what happened to him. That was because of the way we treated Joseph.
Mm-hmm.
And so and you have to wonder if you ever noticed about people, they assume that everybody will react to something the same way they do.
Mm-hmm.
They know what they would do.
That's right.
They did it back when they took out that whole village.
Mm-hmm.
They know what happens when you cross somebody powerful. And now it's come back around to them.
Mm-hmm.
So their guilt is driving
Their
their
reaction.
reactions
Mm-hmm.
and their lives, the way they approach life. We know how this works. This is
Mhm.
what we would do, therefore that's what everybody would
That's a
do.
good point.
And that's still true today.
Oh man.
That is still true today.
Mm-hmm.
We assume that everybody feels about things the same way that we do. So they went up to Joseph's steward and spoke to him at the entrance to the house. I love this. Please, sir, they said, we came down here the first time to buy food. But at the place where we stopped for the night, we opened our sacks, and each of us found his silver, the exact weight, in the mouth of his sack. So we have brought it back with us, and we've also brought additional silver with us to buy food. We don't know who put our silver in our sacks.
Finally, in this statement that they made in the last chapter of "we are honest men," it's actually true for the first time in this whole deal, right?
Mm-hmm.
They talked to their dad, even after everything happened, they had the fear of God in them. They're still lying. They're not telling you the whole truth. They're being deceptive. Now, finally, and you're right, the guilt, right? That's what,
It is.
look, we don't know where it came from, but we had this extra money. I mean, they're not trying to hide anything now.
Yeah.
They're all, everything transparent. You know?
Because again, they know what they would do if somebody stole from them.
That's right, and they are terrified of the consequences of this thing. Just like all of a sudden when they're reminded about Joseph, all that guilt comes to them. We got blood on our hands. We heard the distress of his soul, and they're kind of doing the same thing now we see with the money. When they found that money, it's been bothering them ever since that first sack was open. They've been terrified of this thing, and now they're finally in a place where they may be called to task on what they did, and they're finally being honest.
Nothing they can do about it.
Nothing.
They are in Egypt. They are surrounded by soldiers.
Mm-hmm.
They are completely at the mercy of somebody else for the first time in their entire lives.
Yeah.
They've always been the rich kids. Daddy's powerful.
Mm-hmm.
We've got, we're the bad dudes on the block.
Yep.
They don't have a chance.
Nothing they can do.
Yeah. And then they get the shock of their lives. Verse 23. Now this is the steward. It's all right, he said. Don't be afraid. Your God, the God of your father, has given you treasure in your sacks. I received your silver. And then he brought Simeon out to them. Did this Egyptian just say the God of our father?
Yeah, where's he heard that from?
Yeah.
Right? Simeon must have been preaching when he was in the prison. That must be
Yeah.
I think you're exactly right. And remember, earlier on in chapter 42, when Joseph first brings him out of prison, that's when Joseph brings up the fact that he fears God. And that must have been like a what? Did he just say that?
Yeah, that can't be right.
So Joseph fears God. Now the steward all of a sudden is bringing God into the situation. And I love just the whole sentence that he gives him. Peace be with you.
Yeah.
Peace be with you.
It's all right.
Don't be afraid,
Don't be
right?
afraid.
I mean, this sounds like this could have
Calm
been
down,
said
guys.
by Jesus when he approaches the boat in the New Testament. Peace be
Yeah.
with you. Everything's fine. Don't worry. I mean, don't be afraid. It's usually not the steward of the Egyptians saying to God's people, peace be with you, don't be afraid, right?
Yeah.
You're God and the God of your father. So, man, there's so much going on there. And I love it. It's in the same verse and everything that's when Simeon gets brought out.
Yeah, and it doesn't say, so this is conjecture, but you remember the last time somebody got brought out of a dungeon, they cleaned him up before they brought him in? They can just imagine the horrible things that Simeon must have been going through, and he comes out.
Especially after they delayed so long.
And my suspicion is he comes out, he's been trimmed, he's got good clothes on.
Yeah.
Hi guys.
What's going on? Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, just imagine their shock. What they're anticipating is horrible. They're going to call us to task on this money we stole, and all of a sudden,
Now all of a sudden they're in the clear.
That's right.
They don't have anything to worry about anymore, and then some idiot goes and steals the guy's cup.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. Exactly. So pretty interesting turn in the narrative here in terms of their emotions. You know, oh man, we're all gonna get killed over what we did, and they're honest, and everything kind of works out. I wonder if that's a lesson that's trying to be taught here.
But again, and I'll keep bringing this up because I sincerely believe it. What's the only difference? Benjamin.
Mm-hmm.
We come down and they throw us in jail. Benjamin comes down. He says, "Don't worry about it. Keep your silver. Everything's cool."
Yeah, peace be with you.
Yeah.
Peace be with you.
Joseph is rubbing their faces in it.
Mm.
This is the favored kid.
Mm-hmm.
And if he really is the one who stole the cup, nobody would blame us if we just left him here.
That's right.
Daddy couldn't possibly think anything was wrong with that. Your kid stole the cup.
Yeah. Well, 24 says, and when the man had brought the men into Joseph's house, given them water, and they had washed their feet, and when he had given their donkeys fodder, they prepared the present for Joseph's coming at noon, for they heard that they should eat bread there. So they're anticipating, of all the things they said in verse 18, one specific thing they're worried about is these guys are going to steal our donkeys.
Yeah.
I mean, they could take your head, but you're worried about your donkeys. But not only are they provided for, right? They give them water to drink, get their feet washed, get cleaned up, like you were saying, right? And then they also take care of the donkeys. So not only are they taking, they're being treated as true guests of the house of the second man in Egypt. Yeah.
And they had their feet washed. That's the work of servants. They were worried that would become their job.
Mm-hmm.
And now all of a sudden here they are, servants are treating us.
Yeah, exactly. And I think we could spend a little bit of time on this idea of preparing the present for Joseph's coming. But they heard that they're going to eat there, that Joseph's going to make an arrival. And so everybody's just kind of preparing themselves for him to come. And even though the steward has been so kind and courteous to them, I'm sure the idea of seeing Joseph again, or number two of Pharaoh, they don't know him as Joseph yet, but the idea of this guy coming who accused them of being spies is probably still making them a little anxious.
This is a setup.
Mm-hmm. So it says, when Joseph came home, they brought into the house to him the present that they had with them, and bowed down to him on the ground. So as far as Jacob and the brothers are concerned, all of the silver had to do with, one, give back what we took, but all that other silver was just to say, sorry.
Yeah.
Everything else was the specific gift to Joseph, which was a little bit, little bit, little bit, little bit.
Mm-hmm.
The double was to pay for what they had done wrong.
Yeah.
But the little bit of these things that was a gift to Joseph was the little bit part you were talking
And again, Jacob, what is he concerned with? It's the money.
about. Mm-hmm.
You know, we'll send the gifts, but you know the only way to make this up is we're going to send double the money. Why? Because that's what he would expect.
Yeah, he likes him some money.
He likes the money.
Let's see. They brought him into the house, the present they had with them, and bowed down to him to the ground. So Joseph has now seen them bow down to him at least twice. And he inquired about their welfare and said, "Is your father well? The old man of whom you spoke, is he still alive?" So Joseph may have been wondering what exactly has been taking so long. You know, did the news that Simeon didn't make it back, did Dad die from that, and that's why it's taking him so long? I mean,
they had to wait for Dad to die before they could bring Benjamin back.
Yeah, because they wouldn't.
I hadn't thought about that. That's
me
a good
neither,
point.
but that's a great point. I mean, maybe that's what they were waiting on. They said, "Your servant, our father, is well. He is still alive." And they bowed their heads and prostrated themselves. And he lifted up his eyes and saw his brother Benjamin, his mother's son, and said, "Is this your youngest brother, of whom you spoke to me? God be gracious to you, my son." So there's your point of all the other brothers are laying down on the floor prostrate before Joseph. And he's like, "Oh, hey, is this the guy? Bless you, my son. Welcome."
You. Yeah, he said, "God be gracious to you,
Mm-hmm.
my son." Now, the stewards brought up God.
Now
This guy's brought up God.
Something's
What is
going
on here?
Yeah, and very different reception for Benjamin, his first time to visit as compared to the rest of them.
Yeah.
Verse 30, then Joseph hurried out, for his compassion grew warm for his brother, and he sought a place to weep. And he entered his chamber, and he wept there. So again, we kind of brought this up last week. Each time Joseph weeps, there's 3 times that he does it. it's kind of a marker in the narrative. There's something really significant happening. His first meeting with his brothers, his first meeting with Benjamin, his full brother, and then his meeting of his father. And
when he reveals himself to
correct.
his brothers, yeah.
And when you think about just, it's telling you, this, I mean, these are real. I mean, Joseph's been separated from his brothers. This is his only connection now he has to his mother, Rachel, who's died at this point. I mean, so we can understand why Joseph's overcome with emotion, and honestly, maybe part of it's just the fact that Benjamin's still alive. And as far as Joseph knows, based on his brothers, there's never a possibility that his brother would not be able to show up. You know, so
interesting. We've been talking about Joseph and Jesus, and Jesus wept. Why? Because Lazarus and Mary and Martha were hurting, and Jesus weeps. Joseph, he weeps.
He weeps, and the comparison there is Jesus knew what he was going to do, and he still wept. Joseph knows what he's going to do. I mean, his brothers could not be in a better position now that Joseph knows that they're all okay and they're where he can take care of them. He knows all that they don't, but he does, and he still weeps.
Yeah. Well, and he didn't weep the first time because that's still the brothers. He weeps because it's now Benjamin. Again, like I've been saying all along, Benjamin is never leaving Egypt. Joseph is going to keep him there. Daddy is still playing favorites. Daddy's still alive. He's not going back to that.
That's right. 31. Then he washed his face and came out. So Joseph doesn't want anyone to know he's been weeping. And controlling himself, he said, serve the food. They served him by himself, and them by themselves. And the Egyptians who ate with him by themselves, because the Egyptians could not eat with the Hebrews, for that is an abomination to the Egyptians. So you'll remember, if you've been following with us from the beginning of our time together, it's one of the things we brought up at the beginning was the tension between the Hebrews and the Egyptians. And so when Joseph is in the house of Potiphar, and then when he's brought to Pharaoh and they say this is a Hebrew, and all of that connection, but Joseph has been integrated for such a long period of time into Egyptian society. He married an Egyptian wife, a priest, an Egyptian priest's daughter, Egyptian wife, and he dresses like an Egyptian and all these things. It's kind of easy to forget all the tension that existed between these two cultures and the hatred that was there, going all the way back to, I think, Sarah and Hagar. And so they all eat separately, but this is pivotal to us kind of understanding some of the cultural context of the story of Joseph.
And then they get the next big shock.
That's right. Go ahead, 33.
The men had been seated before him in the order of their ages, from the firstborn to the youngest, and they looked at each other in astonishment. When portions were served to them from Joseph's table, Benjamin's portion was 5 times as much as anyone else's, and so they feasted and drank freely with him. How do you know what order to put us in?
Yeah.
But then, and it says, they feasted and drank freely with him. If Benjamin gets 5 times, is more than he could possibly eat by a factor of 5. Because everybody has everything they want. They can eat. And they just keep piling food on Benjamin's plate. Everywhere we go, this kid gets everything.
That's right. And I mean, you look at the fact that they're surprised and they're shocked. I mean, there's starting to be signs now where they should be able to figure some of this stuff out, And here's the thing too. I think it further is an exclamation point on what happens with Benjamin. They put him in exact order from firstborn to the youngest. So they know what the order is. So that means firstborn should get the double or the triple or the Cinco de Mayo portion or whatever. And so here's Reuben over here, and Benjamin gets all. So they know exactly what your birth order is, but they mess up the fact that firstborn is supposed to get all the extras, and they give it to Benjamin instead.
Deliberately.
That's right.
So, well, I'll tell you what. How about if we leave them on a happy note this week?
Everybody's eating and drinking.
Everybody's eating and drinking, having a good time. They have no idea about the nightmare that's coming in chapter 24.
That's right. It's a good place to
we'll
start.
pick up there next week.
Absolutely. Take care and God bless.
Thank you.